moments when you get the sense that you get to be a part of something much bigger than yourself. Something of eternal value, something that extends beyond your own world into something much more. But I really feel like we've been able to be tasting that some, even in these last few weeks. It's been exciting to see Next Gen Ministries and some of the things they've been working on, and all the different ministries there, and the high school ministry launching, and the collective and kids gathering and finding belonging, and young adults, and we celebrate things that have happened this past week. There's been needs that we've heard about in our community that we've been able to respond to in this past week. And just continual reminder of God saying, lift your eyes up. There's more that I want to do that you get to be a part of, should you set yourself and your smaller kingdom aside to join me. And this morning we get to hear more about that in a way that I just couldn't be more excited. I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment Medard from World Relief. Before I have him come to the stage, I just want to say a couple of things about that. My family and I first were made aware of World Relief back in 2008 when we were living in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, preparing to go overseas with a desire to serve some of the most vulnerable and needy people holistically in the world. And it was during 3 years that we spent in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, that we got to very closely get to know the organization of World Relief, and through them got to develop many relationships with incoming refugees, to hear their stories, to hear the process that they went through, to hear how long they had been in the camps, to all of the work of working with the government and everything to get here, and then to develop friendships and to drink tea in their homes, to play games, to be able to share the love of Christ with people who lived in places where most likely they just wouldn't have had the opportunity to hear. And it was an incredibly moving time. It was a formative time in our lives, one that we look back on often thinking those were some sweet experiences of ministry that we longed for. And so when we moved back here, we were going, man, it would be awesome if there was a World Relief office in Olympia. There's one in Seattle, but that's kind of too far away to be involved. And last year at Christmas time, I heard many of you say that. Like, we're happy to give money to this. Can we do more? Like, when can we be involved with the people? When can we, build relationships with the people? And we were saying, well, at that time, we knew that there were talks. We had been part of talks of an office opening here, but said it's going to take a while. And you still gave generously, but said, boy, when there's the opportunity for us to get relationally involved, that's what we're really excited for. And so for the past year, a little bit longer than a year, we've had the opportunity to be a part of others in our community who have been talking about and doing the work of what would it look like to open up an office for World Relief here in Thurston County. World Relief does all kinds of disaster relief and humanitarian work around the world. They're a Christian nonprofit ministry who focuses largely on working with the most vulnerable, with refugees who are coming into the country. And so we've been working with them to be able to open an office here in Thurston County. And by God's grace, He's allowing us to be a part in some deeper ways, having them office out of our building as they get started here in Olympia. And hopefully helping them find the person that they need to run that office here, and then getting to be very intimately involved with any of the families that begin to arrive here through partnership with them. So I have the sense that we get to be a part of something new in Olympia and new in the lives of these people that is going to affect generations to come. You're going to hear me say it again this morning. This is hugely significant, I believe. Like Olympia will look different. The kingdom of God will look different. We will look different because of this partnership. And so I'm really excited to introduce and to welcome Medard, the Executive Director of World Relief Western Washington, to the stage. He's going to come and share with us a bit from his heart, and then I'm going to come and just ask him some questions that might be some questions that you're wondering about as well. So Medard, we're really honored and privileged to have you here. Thank you so much for giving your time. Would you please come to the stage and share with us your heart? Thank you. Yes, thanks.
Good morning, church. Good morning. That's a good one right there. Well, I am really honored and privileged to be with you here this morning. And before I start, I just wanted to say thank you for having me here this morning. And also, I want to bring the greetings from my colleagues, World Relief Western Washington, to you. This is a very humbling and a great pleasure to be with you and for me to be here to share with you this morning. Before I jump right in, allow me to say a quick prayer as we go through this. Heavenly Father, I want to lift your name high and say thank you for your mercy and your grace upon me and everyone on this in this church this morning. God, as I step here to share what you want to share with the congregation, I want you to take me out of the picture while I share your word. And God, allow me to be humble through the things that I will be sharing and open the heart of the congregation to see where you're calling each and every one of us to stand moving from here. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Like Pastor John said, this has been a long journey coming, and we are really, really, really excited. And through the whole journey, we have seen nothing but God's hand behind every single thing since this dream has been planted in the heart of the leaders of World Relief Western Washington, which I have the privilege to be part of. This morning, I titled my word that I want to share with you as the unnecessary excuses. We live in a world that is challenging. We all do have many obligations and commitments. There is just so much going on. And sometimes this broken world can overfeed us with things that sometimes are right or truth, and sometimes they are not. And all of that may at some point be really overwhelming. And, the list of, refugee crisis around the world. We're talking about climate change. We're still in the midst of COVID. There is just so much going on, and the list can go on. And those things create so much so much noise. And with that comes distraction. And with those distractions, it is easy for us to look at it and say, I'm out, or there is nothing that I can do. So we always have excuses when these things come around, and we have to face them. And with those excuses, sometimes we step away from the greatest calling from God. What is it that God is calling us to be part of? We always bring forward the excuses. And those excuses could be legit sometimes, and we're gonna see it here together. Let me take this off here. It's getting my computer to go off and on. So sometimes those excuses, could be legit, but also sometimes it's because we just have not been paying attention to the things that God has been doing in the midst of the things that are happening. And we're going to see through that as well this morning as we read some passages here. Technology, right? When you count on them, they just let you down right when you really need them. And so just bear here with me as my computer is acting here. And you're right, that's also part of the excuse. So just hold on, just give me a second here to open it up. And so, like I said, sometimes those excuses could be legit. And this morning, we're reading from our first verse, which is out of Exodus 6, from 6 to 12. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go from his land." But Moses said in the Lord's presence, "If the Israelites will not listen to me, then how will Pharaoh listen to me, since I am such a poor speaker?" And this is what I call, a legit excuse, right? Moses has been working with God for a very long time, trying to get the Israelites out of Egypt. And through the miracles that God has been performing as he's sending him to go and speak to the Israelites, they keep on rejecting everything that he was saying. And now, God is asking Moses to go and let Pharaoh know that, "Let my children go out of this land." And here is Moses asking God, "Man, are you crazy or something? Like, what is going on here, right? I have been performing miracles to the children of Israel, and they couldn't even listen or even see your hand behind everything. And now you're asking me to go and to talk to Pharaoh to let them go, while you know that I cannot speak eloquently. How would that be possible?" And, that's really a legit excuse. I am originally from Chad. It's in Central Africa. And in Chad, we speak French. We don't speak English. And so I'm sure by now, after a couple minutes sharing with you, you have already realized that, man, this guy has a strong accent, right? And struggling through my English here. And that is true. I came to the US in 2006, seeking political asylum. And like I said, I come from Chad, and so we don't speak English. World Relief is where I learned my English 16 years ago. World Relief is where I put my first resume together. And World Relief is where my family started. When we came, I came 4 months before my wife arrived to the US. And then 3 months after she got here, she gave birth to our very first child, Mateo. And we just got married the year before I moved to the US. So here we are in the rainy Seattle where, newly married, young couple, and we became young parents in a place where we don't speak English, in a place where we don't understand the system, we don't understand the language. The challenge was huge. I went from there to get my very first job at the Hilton Hotels, and by God's grace, I went on to become a leader at that hotel. But what really happened in that time, speaking of the legit excuses, is that I started working, and 2 weeks through, I was shadowing someone else through the training. And 2 weeks went by, and then we came on duty, starting our shift, and the guy said, "Medar, today you're gonna lead the shift." Now, I started as a security agent, by the way. And so he said, "Medar, today you're leading the shift." What does that mean is that I will have to answer all the calls that come through in that shift. 2 weeks through the job. And I was sitting there looking at the radio that he put on the desk and having all these thoughts going through my mind. And then I told him, "How could you do this to me? You know clearly that I don't understand English that people are saying on the radio when they call, and now you're telling me that I will be leading the shift. How would that be possible?" And the guy said, "No, you have to start somewhere, right?" I said, "Yes, but it's only 2 weeks. I know I will have to start somewhere, but could you take this through so that we can continue doing the work first?" And he said, "No, today you have it." And so I took the radio and we went on. We did the work. But that was my first excuse. I don't understand what people are saying on the radio. I don't speak English, and now you're asking me to lead the shift as we begin working. But that did not cross the guy. It did not let him change his mind. He said, "You're running the shift." So there we go. And so we went on, we worked through the shift, and we finished the shift. The next day we came back, and I picked the radio again, and we worked. And a couple months went through, and eventually I became the security supervisor. Then I became the manager on duty at this hotel. The reality in these unnecessary excuses is that we sometimes we have been so busy to see what God is really doing through the things that are happening. And that will take us to my second point here. That will take me to my second point here, which I pulled out of Exodus 10, verse 13, verse 10 to 13. Exodus 4, 10 to 13. Sorry, I'm having issues with my computer, which I don't know what is happening with rebooting and all of that. Here we go. But Moses replied to the Lord, "Please, Lord, I have never been eloquent either in the past or recently or since you have been speaking to your servant, because my mouth and my tongue are sluggish." The Lord said to him, "Who placed a mouth on humans? Who makes a person mute or deaf, seeing or blind? It is not I, the Lord. Now go. I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." Moses said, "Please, Lord, send someone else." This to me is a great reminder as I think about how God has been carrying me personally. And again, as I'm sharing my own stories with you here, the point is for you to look at it and see where God is calling you later on, or from now as we move forward with this partnership with the church. Today I have the humbling privilege to stand before you here as the executive director. Now, 16 years ago, my excuse has been that I do not speak English, and that I could not take that radio and lead the shift. God challenged me through that time, and I took that radio and I led the shift. And like I said, I went on to become one of the leaders of these great hotels. Last year, when World Relief was looking for the new executive director, that excuse that I had, I did not let it go. Even 16 years almost through, I did not let it go. The reality is that when God is calling us into something, we always want to limit God through his calling by looking at the things that we do not have, rather than the things that we have or the things that God has been building us up for. When God is calling us into something, he's not looking for our capabilities, but our availability. He just wants us to be available for his calling so that he can use us for the glory of his name. This congregation has been great. We have begun this journey about a year and a half ago, talking and having quarterly consultations. And this church, hearing that World Relief is looking for ways to open an office here to welcome refugees in the community, you have stepped right in to that time. And thank you for all the support that we have been receiving, either financially or spiritually, through prayers that guided us through to this point. But this is not going to be an easy thing. And I'm sure you're sitting there thinking like me, having these excuses going through your mind that these are people that we don't know. They have cultures that we don't understand. They are different than us. How can we do? Or you may be having some other challenges. You don't have time to maybe, spend with the families that will be arriving into the community. You may not have financial means to support them, or you have other obligations where you want to put your finance. All of those are things that are reality, like I said, legit excuses. But have we thought about the ways by which God has been blessing each one of us, or all of us as a congregation to this point? Have we been thinking through that? Have we been looking at the grace that God has given all of us as He's calling us into this new opportunity to partner with Him for the glory of His name as we open this office into the community? And what would that mean for each of us? We think of refugee resettlement as a mutually transformative relationship where I coming in, learn something from the families that I am in contact with, and they learn something from me, and it contributes into changing our hearts for the glory of God. Have we been thinking through those things as we're pushing forward for this partnership that is coming in our community? Or do we look at the things that we don't have? Do we look at our own challenges and forget the things that God has been doing? God just reminded Moses as we read, isn't it Him who gave mouth to humans? When Moses is trying to say that I don't speak eloquently. And again, this happened as God was doing so many things with him already, but every time He keeps on bringing back that, as God didn't know when He called him to go and talk to Pharaoh. Yes, you don't speak eloquently. Yes, you have faltering mouth. That's because we usually look into ourselves rather than looking up to God for the things that He is calling us to be part of. And when we do so, we think that we can talk God out of His own plans as He wants to bring glory to His name. And so that could be your own challenge. But also, let me remind you of something. There is no courage without danger in this world. We only become courageous when we're facing danger. There is no perseverance without obstacles. There is no patience, or patience is learned through tribulations that we face in this world. And also compassion is only born through the suffering of others. I do remember when Kabul fell, and people in the U.S. have seen the crisis in Afghanistan, seen people running for their lives and trying to save their lives. Everyone stood up and, oh my gosh, what can we do? How can we help, right? It is through the suffering of others that compassion comes. But here, the reality is that when we saw what happened in Afghanistan, that was not the first time, and it's not going to be the last time. Refugee crisis has been something that existed for ages, for generations, and as long as the world continues to have evil thoughts and evil heart, people will continue to persecute others and to push them out of their land. And that's when God calls us to step into that gap, to partner with Him for the glory of His name as we welcome new people into the community, as we serve others that are coming. When God wants to use us, He knows our limitations, like I pointed before. We need to pull ourselves out of the picture and let Him do His mighty work through us for the glory of His name. And that's exactly what He is reminding Moses of here. And as humans, we always forget that God is omniscient. He knows it all before He calls us into something. And when God calls us into something, He will equip us. He will provide what is needed for us to do the work so that the glory goes back to Him as we partner with God. I usually think about how Jesus called His disciples, the very first disciples that He called. He did not look into any resume, right? He did not ask them to apply for any job with Him. He was going by, and these fishermen, the first two pair that He called, these fishermen, He said, follow me. And so when He called Simon, known as Peter, and Andrew, and then later on James and John, these were fishermen, and he just asked them to follow him. They did not look at, they are fishermen, and he's calling them into pastoral work without any pastoral training, and they just dropped everything and they followed him. And then he taught them how to do the work later on, which is, the Sermon on the Mountain that comes after. He called them to follow him. And that's exactly how God operates. He always wants us to stand out of the picture and let him lead the way. And what happens when we just follow God? When we give him the little that we have, whatever he's calling us to give to him, and he returns it back to us, he multiplies it, and glory goes back to him. Think about when Jesus asked his disciples, let's feed this crowd. And they brought the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. That's all that they had. They placed it into God's hand, and he prayed into Jesus' hand, and he prayed about it. And when he turned it back to them, it got multiplied. And that is a reminder that God is having for us this morning as we look forward into partnering with him in welcoming refugees and immigrants in this community. And that takes me into what I call, into my third point, which is we just have not been attentive to God's calling. We have been so busy to see how God is carrying us through. Let's look at Mark 4 from verse 35 to 41 here. On that day, when evening had come, he told them, let's cross over to the other side of the sea. So they left the crowd and took him along since he was in the boat. And other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. He was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. So they woke him up. And said to him, "Teacher, don't you care that we are going to die?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Silence, be still." The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Then he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked one another, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obeyed him." This is exactly what I mean by we have been so busy not to pay attention to the things that God has been doing in our personal lives as well as in the life of the congregation. We're talking about the disciples here who have been with Christ for a while through his ministry, and he has always been doing miracles that they have seen. But every time that something comes up, they are always surprised. Who is this man that even the wind can obey him? Where have they been this whole time? Where have they been this whole time? Personally, I said last year when World Relief was looking for the new executive director, many colleagues as well as people in the community stepped forward and asked me to apply for this work. And my excuse remained the same. I do not speak English, therefore I am not made for this work. But I always forget, 16 years through, even with World Relief, the different roles that God called me to step in, and he supported me through. When I took that radio after those first 2 weeks, saying that I don't speak English, and going on from there to even become the leader at that hotel, those are the things that God has been doing. But we just do not pay attention to God as he is building us up for the next step of the things that he wants to call us to. He wants to call us to partner with him on. And that is the thing that I want to remind you this morning about. As we look forward into having World Relief in Thurston County, you may be asking yourself that you don't have time, you don't have financial means that you can be supportive of the organization. You may not, you have other obligations, kids to care for, family members to care for. But here are a few cautions that I want to leave you with as we look forward into this partnership. It is true that this will take the effort of every single one of us as we position ourselves as believers of Christ, feet and hand of Jesus, to welcome new people here. Let's say that it will take all of us. It's not going to be easy. But as for you, what is the storm in your life now? What is it that you want to wake Jesus up for? What is your own storm? What is it that you are afraid of to welcome new families in the community? Is it the cultural awareness that you may not have? Is it that it's going to be people that you don't know? What is it that you are afraid of? And where do you still need faith in Christ in? Like he was asking his disciples, do you still not have faith? What is it that you want God to help you with in your faith as we look forward into welcoming refugees in Olympia, which I am really, really, really excited to see the things that God will be doing in this community. So with that, I just want you to hold on those questions as you reflect about going about your day-to-day, your week, and the rest of the time that you will have as we look forward into welcoming refugees in the community. Thank you so much for having me, and giving it back to Pastor John.
Thank you, Medard. I don't know if any of you are having flashbacks to when you had to do like a presentation in Spanish class or French or something like that. You're in high school, and I was talking to my son who has a test coming up soon. He has to speak 3 minutes with his Spanish teacher. And then you imagine getting up and giving a full sermon in another language. Medard, thank you for being so courageous and willing to do that we could hear from your heart directly on these things. That really means a lot. I've got a couple of questions I just kind of want to pose to you. That might be some questions that some of you are wondering about, and you'll have more opportunities to ask more in time to come. But let me just ask you some of these things. For many, we don't understand what the process is that these refugees that you're talking about, what is the process that they go through in order to get here? We know that there's a lot of legal requirements and steps. There's all kinds of wading through things, stuff they have to prove. And then what does that look like from there to when they get here, and then even initially on the ground? Can you just kind of talk us through that process a bit?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that question, because usually for us who do that work, it comes naturally, right? And when we step forward sharing with people, we forget that not everyone is on the same page. Refugee resettlement is a very long process. Let me take a step real quick back here to say that refugees are people who have been persecuted in their homeland countries and had to flee to seek refuge somewhere else and seek protection. And that could be, those persecution could be, based on their religious belief or their political affiliation or opinion on something, or their affiliation to some social groups. And so with that, their life is in danger and they have to leave their country. Now, those that will have the privilege and the humbling opportunity to resettle when they get here are those who have been through a very lengthy process, which include things like checking on their medical, their health issues, and going through those treatments before they get here, checking to make sure that they are who they said that they are, checking to make sure that their story of persecution is true and that they are safe to be brought into the country. And once that happens, and again, it's a very long process, they go through that for years before they get here. And before they get relocated into the US, the federal government, who contract with refugee resettlement agencies, which we are one of them, of the 9. So there are 9 of them in the country, and World Relief is one of those 9 refugee resettlement agencies that the government will contact, and they will let us know we have this family that have been vetted and ready to come, and this is the size of the family, these are their medical history, and this is their language abilities, and so we're gonna book a flight for them, and they will be arriving these dates, and we get ready for the families before they get here. And then we have caseworkers that will pick them up from the airport as they get here. And sometimes they go into the host homes, which are volunteers from churches that have open space in their homes that can that go through our volunteer training, and they are vetted, and then they can host the families while we look for a permanent housing for them. And then from there, kids get enrolled into school so they can begin. The adults get enrolled into English classes, job classes, and then we start looking for ways for them to become self-sufficient and to stand on their own feet.
Yeah, I can remember. I don't know what the current is, but I know when we were in North Carolina, it wasn't uncommon to hear people at that time. I mean, it was like 10 plus years sometimes that they were in refugee camps. Some it was 15 years or more. And you're right. When you say a long process,
Yes.
we're not talking like 4 months necessarily.
Nope.
We're talking sometimes years. Of course, when there's crisis like in Afghanistan, I would imagine sometimes, certain things get prioritized. Give us an idea of what this looks like on a global scale. Like how many, I know we talk about like forcibly displaced people, and that's a category that includes refugees, asylum seekers, and other categories. Asylees. So can you kind of talk us through like what is that looking like on a global scale? What kind of numbers? And then maybe talk us through what we have been a part of just even this last year, how many were resettled in Seattle area and so on.
Yeah. So there are over 100 million forcibly displaced people around the globe right now. And that number pretty much increased by about 44,000 every day. And I was reading some of the documents that went a little farther to show that representation is about one man or woman or a child every 2 seconds that are being forcibly displaced around the globe. And 100 million, that's really a big number. Now, when we talk about 100 million, only less than 1% of those people will ever get a chance to be resettled, which means some will spend generations and generations in the refugee camps. So we had a family that arrived that the father was born in a refugee camp, and his kids were in the tens, and their parents could not make it. That's how long it had taken them to be able to be resettled into the U.S. And we, as organization, in partnership with the churches, which for us, our mission is to empower the local church to serve the most vulnerable, because we believe in the fact that this work cannot be done by an agency. It is only when churches come together that we can provide a space that is welcoming to other people in the community. And so last year, we had the privilege to serve over 1,200 people in our Western Washington, which we have 2 office locations running right now, the Kent office location, and then last year we opened a new one in Whatcom County, Bellingham, and this year God is still on the move. He has always been, and so this year we have that green light from the federal government to open the office in Olympia, which we are so thrilled about and looking forward to seeing what God will be doing in the midst of the community.
Yeah, we're so excited about that too, and can't wait to be a part. Can you tell me what are some of the challenges that refugees often face when they first get here? What are some of those, what does life look like for them? For example, I remember that even just like monetarily, they're given a little bit of money from the government, but it's not a whole lot, and they've got to figure out how to make that spread. So there's all kinds of challenges. Can you help us get a picture of what it would look like for a family arriving?
Yeah. The challenges are huge, but they are surmountable. We can overcome them. I shared with you a little bit about myself. I did not come to the U.S. as a refugee, but as an asylum seeker. And then my asylum was granted. But it is pretty much the same challenge that we experience. Language, cultural shock, having to leave everyone that you know back home, and you are here in a new country where you're trying to figure out everything, but also you don't have your own family, and you have to rebuild that. You left your friends home. Those are part of the challenges that people face when they get here, which is why for us as a Christian organization, we believe that people who come through World Relief have more of that opportunity because the churches step into the gap and provide that support to families that are coming. Each refugee that arrives receives $1,275. They just increased that amount by $50 this year, this fiscal year. And so now it's $1,275 that
One time?
Yes, that's just a one-time grant that every refugee receives. And they gave that to the resettlement agencies to help the families build their lives with. And that money not only helps to feed people. It also helps to provide clothing for them, to pay their rent, and to pay anything else, including cell phone and everything else that they need out of just the $1,275 that people receive. And you can clearly see that these days, even your application fee to get into an apartment will take all of that already. It's not even enough to get you into paying the application fee and the deposit to get into the apartment. That plays into the challenge of refugees coming. But one thing that I know for sure is that refugees are people who are very resilient. They just need someone to point them to that first direction and to help them to step into the community, and then they build their lives from there. But the beginning is definitely challenging. And that's why the role of the church is crucial into providing that space of welcoming and rooted and empowered within that community as new people come into the community.
Well, and that leads me to my last question for you, and maybe one that is on these people's minds and hearts, is so then what does it look like for us as a church? Not just like as a big, all of us collectively, but what are the ways that people can get involved? People have been saying that, like, we want to be up close and personal and relationally involved. What are the different ways that people can get involved as these families start to come? And I believe April is what we're looking at. We're trying to get the office set up and running, and then April is when, and you're hoping for 50 families, or planning for 50 families in this year. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. So we got the approval to open the office, but we're not going to see our first families coming into Olympia until April, because we have to lay the ground, we have to build partnerships and all of that before we start receiving the first families, and that will be April of next year. And for all of you as church members, I think I am reminded of, as I was coming down, I was looking into this, and I said, oh, this is great. Let me get this. Out of Hebrews 13, verse 1 and 2, we read on there that it says, let brotherly love continue. Don't neglect to show hospitality. For by doing this, some have welcomed angels as guests without knowing it. I think the key word in here is hospitality, right? As church members and as congregation, it is that hospitality. And hospitality is making people feel belong, making people feel a part of the community, making people feel welcome, that I am loved. I have left everything behind, but I am loved here. People want me here. People want me to be part of this community. That is the first step that we have to take all together as church, as we will see these new families walking around in the community, because there will be so many things that they don't know. But how do we help them understand that it is okay that you don't know, because we have different culture, you have different culture, and let's work together. Let's create a space where they can integrate. We have many opportunities that the church will be playing that role of welcoming, rooted, and empowered within the community. We have volunteer opportunities like Cultural Companion, which is a program where we match volunteers who have been trained with the families, that they can spend time with them, maybe going to grocery shopping together, or taking the kids and going and playing together at the park. That's one thing. We also have what we call the GNT, which is the Good Neighbors team. It's a group of church members that we put together, and we pretty much assign them a refugee family that they will resettle. So they will work with them to find them apartment, to help the parents find jobs, and to be friends with them. And through it all, we see what we call the mutually transformative relationship that happen. Now, not everyone coming is Christian. We have people coming from all over the world, and this is also an opportunity for us to walk what Jesus called us to. And as we walk the life of Christians, we bring people to be curious. Who are you really? Why are you doing what you're doing? Because the Word of God is not only by reading or opening the Bible with people. It is also through our actions. It is also through our walk. And as we do so, we create that curiosity in people, and we help them to see a better image of the God that we are serving. I think it is really a huge opportunity, and there are many, many, many ways. I mean, children will get here. Parents won't understand American school systems. It will take people within the community who will work with those parents to help them understand what it means for your kids to go to school here. I mean, I learned something this year. My oldest son, who was born just 3 months after my wife got here, will turn 16 in December. And he, this year, was talking about homecoming or coming home? Homecoming. And we're talking about 16 years in the US, right? I am still learning some things about American system. And so I'm like, what is that? And my son was so stressed trying to figure out what to wear on that day. And that was only this year that I learned that. And those are part of the things that as we come alongside families and walking alongside them, we help them to understand so that they can better support their children in this new community. And also helping the kids do their homeworks. Those are ways by which we step into the gap as families rebuild their lives into the community. Yeah.
One of the neat opportunities we were able to have as a family when we lived in North Carolina was getting some of our other friends and other churches involved in this and trying to help that little bit of money that they get stretch as far as they could. So when we would hear that a family was arriving, we say, okay, does anybody have an extra couch? Does anybody have a bed? And let's try to help them not use that money on furniture. Let's stock their refrigerator and their pantry for them so they don't have to use that initial money on that. Does anybody have an old cell phone? Let's help them hold on to that money. And then let's meet up with them weekly and see how their kids are doing with their schooling. Can we provide some tutoring? Can we help them with those things so that they can succeed in school? And just how can we get really involved with these families on a consistent basis? And I'll tell you what, we were incredibly blessed. I think I shared with you guys, maybe one of my first Sundays with you, or Thursday nights actually, I think at that time. But I remember being able to go back to that apartment complex. What was it, maybe 5 years later or so, went and knocked on Chatura's door, and he still lived there. His daughter answered the door, and she was like, I remember your wife. She helped me, and her English was so much better, and she was talking about, she helped me with my math every week, and I'm doing good in school, and I'm getting there, and it was just amazing. And so there are all kinds of ways, you're right, but it starts with the hospitality of opening our arms and our lives to people. And so, Medard, thank you for spending time with us to give us a picture of this. Church, I said it at the beginning, I want us to just try to imagine how transformative this is for one family who comes out of this wondering, comes out of whatever traumatic situation they're coming out of, wondering, is there hope for them and for their family, and what will the future look like? And to come and to be received like this and loved, and then the generations that begins to impact, and then the community that we get to be a part of by saying, look at the diversity that we get to experience and be a part of in this community, and how our eyes are opened and how we're changed by this. And then over and over, like, this is something really significant. So I want us to be praying about what God would be doing, as Medard challenged us earlier today. I'm going to invite the band back up, and we're going to prepare for communion. During this song, you'll be able to come and get your communion elements. And as we do that, let's remember that the reason that we're taking this is because we have a God who is hospitable, a God who welcomed us into his family by giving sacrificially of his very son. And it's this that we remember when we come to communion, when we take the bread, when we take the juice, and we are reminded of all that God did to not to stay in his comfort zone, but Jesus did not stay in heaven, did not consider equality with God something to hold on to, but instead lowered himself, came into this earth as a servant to overcome every obstacle of our sin, of our guilt, of our shame, to welcome us, all of our excuses of why we couldn't be lovable, and for him to bring us into his family So that's what we're going to reflect on as we go to the table. So I'll come up and lead us in that in just a couple of moments.